I have an opinion. Boo! What the fuck is wrong with you? Don't worry, it's not political, it's about the Spider-Man movies. Oh hell nah, that's even worse! Okay, we know that when it comes to discussing the Spider-Man movies, it can get pretty hairy. So much so that we've all accepted that our opinions will never change about the best movies, so instead we argue niche topics like who's the best Peter Parker, the best Spider-Man, best soup, best theme, best trip, best dip, best toys, best flips, best clothes. Okay, you get the idea. So before moving forward, I'd like to say that this is my opinion, okay? You may think the other movies are better, and that's completely fine, and I respect you. I mean, that doesn't mean you're right, but I completely understand otherwise. Anyway, let's get to said opinion. I think Spider-Man Homecoming is the best Spider-Man movie, and it's not even close. Number 1. Tom Holland is the best actor, and it's not really the others' fault. The Spider-Man movies, I think, really are icons of the era they were produced in. Spider-Man 1 was released in 2002, and deadass, that was one of the cringiest, most unrealistic eras of teenage depictions. The early 2000s did very little to capture the reality of teenagers and more so cared about stereotypes. Tobey Maguire was low-key kinda cringe. Line deliveries felt awkward, performances seemed half-hearted or confusing. Half the time it's hard to believe he's a real person in this world. Honestly, it's kind of hard to believe anyone is real in this world. Maybe Maguire wasn't the best choice for this, but I don't know, because if a director came at me and told me to make my entire personality a stereotypical emotionless dork with nerdy tendencies, he does a perfect job at doing that. Some of you may say that's the point, that Peter Parker is awkward and a dork and weird. He's not supposed to be this perfect spoken person with lots of friends. And I completely understand what you mean, and I genuinely agree with you. But there's a difference between the general description of a character and a stereotype. It seems like the goal wasn't to tell you a story about a teenager, it was to tell you a story about adults pretending to be teenagers. I feel bad for Maguire because no one in this movie acts like a real person, and to be fair with you, neither does he. In 2012, things were fairly better, stereotypes were definitely tuned down, but realism in movies pretty much just meant darker tropes and a change in color tone. Andrew Garfield is an amazing actor. He definitely had the charisma, the jokes, and could fairly pull off a nerdy look sometimes. He definitely does a better job than Tobey Maguire acting-wise. When he was upset, you felt it. When he was mad, you felt it. His line deliveries weren't awkward, he delivered lines of an awkward teenager. Although I think his Spider-Man was great, amazing even, his Peter Parker struggled. Undoubtedly, this era of movies I think forced him not to be a caricature of a dork like Maguire was, but rather an outcast who's rather too cool or too different for everyone else. Give him a 21 Pilots soundtrack and he's perfect. Because of that, the vibe of this entire movie was dark and emotional. They didn't have much time to fit in the fact that this is a highly intelligent and goofy kid who has a knack for science and math. Tom Holland knocks both of them out of the water, because instead of relying on a stereotype or too cool for school archetype, they low-key just gave us the most realistic depiction of a teenager, hiring an actor who not only looks the youngest, but is more bright-eyed, childish, and actually does things teenagers do. Teenagers, especially academically gifted teenagers, don't go to random shipyards by themselves and skateboard. That's weird. They go to after-school clubs trying their best to look good for college. Their biggest day-to-day issues don't happen to be missing the bus or getting into fights over lunch. Tom Holland, just like Garfield, is an amazing actor. I think Maguire is a great actor too, but his performance in Spider-Man is objectively bad. Trust me, it's nostalgia. I've argued with my friends about this, I've looked it over several times. Maguire just isn't a good actor in this movie. He's mostly making this face and has one range. The range of a Telltale character. I get it, he's awkward, but he can't even show another facial expression when he's sad. Everyone steals the scene from him because he just doesn't act. Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield both have powerful deliveries and play their roles fine. The biggest difference between Holland and the other actors is that Holland's Peter bled into his Spider-Man. He isn't intimidating, highly accurate, and skillful, or overly dramatic. Tom Holland literally just acts like a kid, and he does a wonderful job at it. It may not be for everybody, but I personally enjoyed it a lot because when I was 13 watching this, I felt like he was just like me. I remember how it felt like when I was embarrassed by how high my voice was, or how no one took me seriously. These are things teenagers care more about in their day-to-day, not getting shoved into lockers or borderline insulting stereotypes. Whichever version of Peter you like more is cool. I think they're all interesting, and I'm happy we got to see different actors portray the same character. But neither Garfield or Maguire really captured what high school is or what it's like to be a teenager, especially for the kind of person Peter Parker is. Hollins is clearly academically talented. He's as bright-eyed and annoying like teenagers are. And when the emotional moments come, he hits them all perfectly without relying on tropes or blatant stereotypes to drive his acting or performance. Number 2. It's a better coming-to-age movie. If you think about it, the story of Spider-Man is a coming-to-age story. Sure, you can find exceptions from time to time, but it's kind of the point of Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. Anyone can wear the mask, his humble beginnings, trying to balance relationships, school, and being a superhero. Yep, that's kind of the perfect combination of coming to age. Although I appreciate Spider-Man 1's efforts to show you the day in the life of Peter Parker, he unfortunately doesn't really grow in this movie. He's in high school for barely half of the movie. We do see his powers change him into being a bit of a careless person, but to be honest, that's about it. Uncle Ben gives him a lecture about something that wasn't even really his fault, and he understandably gets upset about that and lashes out. But a misunderstanding and slight carelessness doesn't justify a great change in character. So when Uncle Ben immediately dies, his shift to full-on Spider-Man doesn't feel deserved, but rather rushed. For the second half of this movie, he already is Spider-Man. He already finished with the transformation. His character doesn't need to change, and Green Goblin can steal the rest of the movie. A quick breakdown about the coming-to-age genre. Coming to age, plain and simple, is about how a protagonist, usually a teenager, transitions from childhood to maturity. The difference between these stories and most other genres is that it's an internal journey of the character. The plot focuses on who the protagonist is and the struggles within themselves. External plot points like saving the world or getting the love interest are treated like secondary subjects. These internal struggles usually exist along these core themes: loss of innocence, identity, and responsibility. When I look at Spider-Man 1, I struggle to see any of these really explored. Peter Parker isn't an identity-conflicted person throughout the movie. He was a good kid before the bite, and he's a good kid afterwards. To say slight conflicts with bullies or his struggles to talk to girls or make friends is enough of a narrative is goofy. That's what a stereotype is. Imagine hating on one of the nicest people you've ever met just because you identify them as a nerd. Yeah, that's a stereotype, and if you do that, you're weird. So if everyone does that in this movie, they're fucking weird. He barely acknowledges maturity and growing up. He doesn't seem fazed or stressed about it. Hey, buddy, you graduate by the next act, bruv. Lock in! Responsibility only exists within the 5-minute window of Uncle Ben's death, and the second the mask is on, mission accomplished. He's the Spider-Man. None of these subjects are ever mentioned again except for when he turns MJ down due to wanting her to be saved. A mature and adult sacrifice. Though in general, like I said, the movie barely acknowledges that internal journey of coming to age. In fact, it speedruns any mention of it. The majority of this movie focuses on external plot points: Mary Jane, Green Goblin, Harry, and Aunt May. Peter maybe gets a flash of attention, then remains a reactionary character. Amazing Spider-Man definitely focused a lot more on Peter Parker, taking a different route than both movies, with Peter trying to learn more about his parents. When it comes to coming of age, Amazing Spider-Man has a better attempt with this genre. While the movie acknowledges the external plot points, they certainly aren't the focus or the core of this movie. Peter does go through an internal journey, but unfortunately the journey has less to do about who he is as a person, but rather his understanding of his past and his parents. Peter isn't concerned about who he is or who he can be. He's asking himself, what kind of person were my mom and dad, and why did they leave me? Throughout the movie, he isn't really fighting his maturity or innocence. But I'll admit, what the movie does accomplish is that it's less subtle about his transformation from being bit into becoming Spider-Man. Maguire used his new powers to take advantage of those who were already taking advantage of others. Sure, it's not Uncle Ben approved, but he doesn't break the law, and given his family's struggling circumstances, you can't really get mad at him for signing up and dreaming about impressing MJ. Garfield, on the other hand, does commit a crime. He not only steals from the store by accepting the drink, he's cooperating with a robber, making the robber more successful to Peter's own benefit. Bro literally is an accomplice. Not to mention that during his revenge, he targets criminals of similar traits with strong hostility. Not to stop them from their crimes, but again, for his own personal benefit. Even when he successfully stops a criminal, when discovering he's not Uncle Ben's killer, he says,
"This could have gotten a lot worse."
This guy lowkey could have killed that man. So this transition feels warranted and more satisfying than Spider-Man 1. The movie also does try its hardest to world build and show a living world outside the main character. For example, reoccurring tertiary characters like Flash, who even has a bit of an arc, reoccurring locations expanding their scale and list of characters each time we see them. It's an interesting world and it feels real. Unfortunately, as the movie does try its best, it's forced to be incredibly limited due to Peter's obsession with his parents. We don't see much of this world through his eyes because it's rather faced towards his parents in the past. Tom Holland's Spider-Man Homecoming is the perfect embodiment of coming to age. It definitely is a different take on Spider-Man and they switch a lot of things up, but I'd argue this works to their benefit because they found a perfect way to explore coming of age. While the last two movies treat Spider-Man's transitionary period as a brief portion of his story, and Homecoming, that's the entire length of the movie. He's a sophomore throughout the entire movie. We also don't see Peter get bit or much of who he was beforehand, and we know the writers and directors skipped this because they didn't want to bore the audience with what they've already seen a million times. But they also make a point out of this. Peter Parker was your typically incredibly academic kid who was obsessed with superheroes, but instead of naturally maturing into an adult, gaining superpowers made him want to reject his life and completely erase it so he could get into his adult stage immediately, regardless of the consequences. He already has the advanced suit and is already an incredible fighter. Peter doesn't have a lack of courage or skill, but that's the point because while he may already look like Spider-Man at the start of the film, he lacks maturity, patience, responsibility, and self-identity. The movie doesn't shy away from these ideas either. They make it quite clear. Peter is constantly putting his grades at risk and muddying his academic future by being too focused on his Spider-Man dreams in class, and he also quits the academic decathlon team. He even gets detention for leaving class during an exam and even leaves that too. Peter shows the lack of maturity because he continues to manipulate the academic decathlon team. He quits then joins when it's convenient for him, only to benefit his dreams to becoming an Avenger. Peter continuously alienates his friends by still missing the event, ditching Ned, leaving him to be alone and embarrassed at the party, and ditching Liz during Homecoming. Peter ignores Aunt May, Hogan, hacks Tony Stark's suit, and then ignores him too. Peter lowkey is kind of a shitty friend, honestly. Ned didn't feel comfortable hacking a $1 billion suit and pled Peter to not force him to. But Peter just kept begging him to do it, so eventually he did it for him. Not fun to lie, bro. That's not very friendly, Spider-Man. He actively puts his friends and other people in danger and almost kills them. And even after all of that, he still sees himself beyond high school, just to do the same thing again. Coming to age stories treat external plot points like secondary subjects, and the movie does this in an insanely creative way. Liz is Peter's love interest, but never drives the core plot and always comes second to Peter's own plans and goals of becoming an Avenger. Even when given the chance to be something more with her, he immediately leaves her without a second thought. The largest external plot point is what they do the best. The Vulture throughout the movie barely interacts with Peter. Vulture is given the chance to grow alongside Peter's growth until the very end of the movie. So while the Vulture is the main villain, Peter throughout the movie is focusing on himself and his troubles as a superhero, not countering everything the Vulture does directly. This works so well because when these worlds clash, the tension is a lot stronger. You had the chance to learn who the Vulture is without that shaping your thoughts on Peter and vice versa. The Vulture is treated exactly how a main protagonist is, allowing the audience to relate to him and understand him. But keeping them mostly separated until the very end allowed the audience to spend most of their time with Peter, making the Vulture a secondary subject while Peter mostly struggles internally. Come on, like that's pretty good. So, to summarize everything, in Spider-Man Homecoming, Peter Parker spends the entire movie in an internal struggle. He incorrectly chooses to let go of his innocence, chasing glory and acceptance by those he used to look up to, becoming an Avenger. He makes this decision because of his newly found powers and boost from Tony Stark's suit, giving him an incorrect idea of who he is. He sees himself as better and above those around him. He almost took down Captain America and is physically stronger than everyone he is faced against. But while he outwardly looks like Spider-Man, he lacks responsibility to oneself, deliberately ruining his own life and important childhood moments like friendship and his first love to chase something he deep down doesn't really want. At the climax of this, he forgets who Peter Parker is. When Tony Stark takes away his suit, he admits he's nothing without it. Only when facing a true challenge that almost kills him is he reminded of his humble beginnings. Sure, the suit made him stronger and more advanced, but he also almost lost to a man without any physical superiority. Meaning, he had it all wrong. His internal struggle can only be solved by stepping back and learning who he is, experiencing the final years of his childhood. These are my reasons why I think out of the first Spider-Man movies, Homecoming wins by a long shot. But okay, you might disagree. After all, this is a hot take, so let me know what you think in the comments. This could have been an hour-long video about me just talking about the differences in the movies, but it's not because it's kind of hard to make videos.